Hello, I'm Don.
And hi, I'm Cindy. Welcome to Pearls of Liberty, September 28th, 2013, the last Saturday in September. And many people believe that October is going to hold some dramatic changes, and we are going to present a few possibilities in this week's Pearls of Liberty.
October surprise, and it's not even an election year.
Well, this will be more surprising than any election has been if it actually happens. Global economic crash has become unavoidable. What do you think?
There's a lot of people saying that, and there are a lot of really smart people. So I tend to believe that they're correct. I always thought for a long time that this would be coming. The only question is timing, but more and more people are pointing to about the middle of October. And that's what I'm expecting, so we're thinking in those terms.
You know, it's kind of odd that Max Kaiser had predicted that this would happen in April, that there would be a crash in April.
I think that there are all these possibilities, and people are finding it hard to decide about what's going to really happen because they involve rule of law, they involve stopping the bad guys, they involve truth coming out about what our real foundation is economically in the United States and in the world, exposing what the U.S. petrodollar is and dollar hegemony and the reserve currency and all of that stuff. It's all a part of the picture.
Another interesting addition to that information is this video with Bill Still, which appeared on Press TV, Looming U.S. government shutdown. This is another point of view, and I know that you are a Bill Still fan.
Yeah, and this is Iranian television, so they're obviously outside of the system. And he's got Bill Still from America, North Carolina, and he's got the commentator here, the moderator on Press TV. He's got these two experts, Bill Still and a British guy. And Bill Still is making a lot of sense. The British guy, not at all impressed with, and he's just sort of a spouting the typical conventional wisdom, which is pretty unwise if you ask me. But Bill Still, especially at about 17 minutes, really gets into the meat of what is going on and what could happen and how the United States as a sovereign nation can just stand up and print its own money. And that is actually going to start happening. On October 1st, U.S. Treasury notes will begin to happen. And a lot of people are speculating that this shift that Bill Still is recommending here is actually in the works. One of the quotes in the text of this page is that Treasury Secretary Jack Lew says that the U.S. will exhaust its borrowing capacity no later than October 17th. Well, that's with regard to the current debt ceiling, and probably that's going to get pushed out. But nevertheless, Bill also talks about how, according to IMF numbers, and they've got some serious number crunchers there, that the ratio of debt to GDP, gross domestic product, in the United States is and has been for some time in the unsustainable territory, and a crash is only a matter of time. But Bill does have some very smart ideas about how we can cushion that. And this is the guy that one of the people put together the Money Masters film in the late 90s. He's been recommending these solutions for some time, and people are finally starting to listen. Iceland was a nation that actually listened to him, and they are out from under the thumb of the bankers now. So there's some really good stuff here, and I really hope that, and I've personally read Bill Still's book, No More National Debt. It makes a tremendous amount of sense. And the fact that we the United States, Treasury Department, and not the Federal Reserve, independent private franchise of the Rockefeller or Rothschild banking empire, the Treasury Department is going to print Treasury notes beginning October 1st, $100 bill, and that might mean that this plan is going into action. So that would be a good thing. Stuff is changing.
just based on the date, October 17th, we tend to not be very reactionary and often don't put a whole lot of stock in these kind of predictions, but it's probably never a bad idea to have made some sort of preparation, maybe have a little cash on hand, maybe a week or two worth of essentials like toilet paper and of course food, water.
Yep, maybe even some gas if the gas station's shut down. If you have a long commute like I do, I've been actually thinking about that.
And we certainly don't want to spread fear, but the thing about having a little bit of extra set aside, some provisions, you can always use it. It's not like you're going to spend the money on it and then lose the money if nothing happens. You can still lose anything that you've picked up to pad your pantry against the event that possibly it might be difficult to get goods and services. Moving more into the political side, having looked at the financial side, this is from the National Journal, and Karen Hudes had a link to this article on her Facebook page. Senator says politics have reached Civil War levels.
And Karen Hughes is saying that she agrees with Tom Harkin that this ratcheting up of the rhetoric in the midst of the financial crisis is actually counterproductive. And I can definitely see her point. And Harkin is actually pointing the finger at Ted Cruz. So I have mixed feelings about that because I really admire him for doing this filibuster. And yeah, there might be some ulterior motives, and we don't know the guy well enough. My left-leaning brother has pointed out that Cruz's wife works for Goldman Sachs as some kind of a regional rep. So there's no way that that Cruz is beyond suspicion in his motives here. And you have to wonder about people that are trying to stir up strife. That's why I think it was so critical, the question that Rand Paul asked Ted Cruz, and the first question he took, which I don't know was within the first hour or two of the filibuster, I believe, maybe as late as 3 hours into it. But whatever, Rand's question was, do you want to shut down the government? Because Rand said, I think that would be very unwise. And Ted Cruz says, right, I don't want to shut down the government. I just want to send a message loud and clear to the American people that we don't want Obamacare to destroy our country, because he says that's what it would do. And I have to agree with the people that have analyzed this and understand what's going on and say, yeah, it looks like it's actually designed to tear us apart, bring us down financially, etc. So I'm glad that Ted Cruz took a stand against it in that filibuster, but nevertheless, the ratcheting up of the rhetoric when we're approaching this fiscal cliff is not a good thing. It's time for people to work together. It's time for, as Bill Still points out in that video on the other link, at one point, I don't know exactly how many minutes into it he says this, but he says the Democratic solution of going socialist won't work, and the Republican solution of austerity won't work either. It's time to do a completely different tactic, and that is to print our own money. And he's absolutely 100% right. And I believe that's actually what is going to happen. And so some of the things I think that actually Karen Hudes is working behind the scenes to help support, because what we're talking about is rule of law overcoming fraud. And ultimately, in order for the U.S. to take a stand as a sovereign nation, we have to expose the fraudulent banking that has been going on.
Getting to that point, though, of having enough of a consensus among the American people to make a significant change could be a tricky thing. And of course, we've heard from people like Fulford and even from Karen Hudes that the U.S. military is taking a stand against the cabal, against the Federal Reserve, not directly the Federal Reserve, but the group of people who run it. And it's interesting to think about what a civil war would look at. Is this quote, "It's dangerous, it's very dangerous. I believe, Mr. President, we are at one of the most dangerous points in our history right now, every bit as dangerous as the breakup of the Union before the Civil War." At that time, there was a division between states. It was pretty clear cut division between the North and the South. This time, if we had this kind of a conflict, the divisions would not be so clear cut, and I'm wondering what it might even look like. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, a little bit. I first want to point out that you didn't say this, but I want to correct a common misconception that the Civil War was about slavery. It wasn't. That was an after-the-fact strategy and actually propaganda tactic of Abraham Lincoln to free the slaves so that they would fight the North and oppose the Southern masters, et cetera, et cetera. The Civil War was really economic, and it really was due to tariffs that were not allowed to. They were too tough on the states, and there was a choice between the states having the power and the federal government having the power, and that's what the Civil War was really all about. So if there was a Civil War, what it would look like now, yeah, I don't think it would be clear-cut boundary lines, because there aren't the economic blocks that we had back in those days. We had the agricultural versus the industrial North, the agricultural South. So that was the dividing line then. Today, maybe I would think it would tend to be the big cities, which would be more socialist leaning, versus the countryside and the rural areas, which would tend to be more independent and want smaller government. So I tend to think that's where the boundary lines will be if we move into something that would resemble a civil war.
So it's really most likely any conflict is going to remain an ideological conflict and be solved by political means. I would guess. I can't imagine fighting actual battles like they did during the Civil War.
Well, the Homeland Security has been saying that the patriots and the gun owners and libertarians are the enemy. So yeah, it's going to, if it gets to that stage, it is going to be the people that want liberty would be trying to avoid a conflict, and the authoritarian central government would be saying you're the terrorists and trying to pick a fight. So that's what is looming on the horizon.
We do have an interesting PDF that is 17 pages of exchanges of letters between Karen Hudes and some other people. And of course, we'll provide the link for this. People have had difficulty reading this online. You may have to download the PDF and open it on your local disk, but it's probably significant enough to go to the trouble to do that. And she was writing to some governors, asking them to prepare possibly for some kind of conflict. And I think her main point is pretty much distilled in this paragraph. The Vatican and other entities with no signature authority over this gold are attempting to steal the gold and install martial law in the United States. The U.S. military is defending the U.S. Constitution and the rule of law. There's that magic phrase, the rule of law.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize what the authority that Karen Hughes has here is as a lawyer for the World Bank. And the stance that she is taking is she wants to uphold rule of law. And she's not talking color of law, the federal government is the boss and you better do what we say. She's talking actual rule of law. And she knows that the governors are the ones that have the authority, and that the Federal Reserve is a corporation. She doesn't come right out and say it. And that the federal government has usurped its authority and is acting under color of law in many instances. She doesn't spell all that out, but that's reading between the lines where I believe she's coming from. So this is quite a statement that she's put out here about Vatican and other entities wanting to steal gold. It ultimately it does boil down to control and money and hard assets.
An interesting way to keep up with what Karen Hudes is looking at and writing about is her Facebook page. And I'm not sure if she has a blog, but she spends a lot of time on Facebook and offers a lot of information through her Facebook page. So that can be a helpful way to kind of keep tabs on what's going on with some of these issues.
Yeah, I think I was just saying that what Karen is doing is really emphasizing rule of law, and she is taking the stand that what's going to happen is that rule of law is going to triumph, that in past turbulent points in history, I'm interjecting this, that you have various strong men or personalities that arise and people galvanize behind them, and it becomes not about rule of law, but about a ruler who people follow. And I'm hoping that's not what's going to happen. I think the cabal has positioned themselves to hide behind somebody like Obama who acts in that vein, but more and more I don't see that working. So, and I'm excited that there do seem to be people at the level of high international finance like Karen that are standing strong for rule of law.
Well, the interesting thing about the beneficial thing about rule of law is it's an objective standard, and it can't just arbitrarily be altered. It has to be followed, and it applies equally to everybody. And unlike a lot of the laws in our country, where some of what we've experienced, that laws apply differently. We thank you for joining us for this week's Pearls of Liberty and hope that you're having a great weekend.
And as always, we remind you to see the world the way that it really is. Then see yourself in it. Walk your walk. You are the one you've been waiting for.